guys would like to say for a moment before we take questions?
Rebuttals?
Yes.
I want to talk about your farm stand example, if I may.
Okay, a couple minutes?
Just a couple of minutes. And I would completely agree that somebody wants to put up a farm stand should be allowed to put up a farm stand. But my analysis of why that person was not allowed to varies very slightly. I mean, it was a government agency that came and said you can't have a farm stand without having all this fancy gear. But who was it that told the government you've got to have all that fancy gear to have a farm stand? The government didn't come up with that idea all by itself. Are you sure? Have you heard of lobbyists?
I also worked at a state agency.
Let me finish my story. I'd be willing to bet that it was some, I don't know, equipment manufacturers or agribusiness or who knows what, who went to the government and said, if somebody's going to serve food, they've got to have all this fancy gear. Don't you agree, government? And, you know, with the campaign contributions that go on.
Can I correct you, because I know the reality, and I'd love to take up on your bet, but it wouldn't be fair because I know the backstory.
I would like to finish.
Okay, well, your premise is factually wrong.
Okay, well, regulations like that typically do come from corporate lobby. And therefore, it's corporations, the big ones, that that end up deciding that the little guys may not operate.
And Stoney, isn't it true, you know this because I've heard you say it, the original regulatory committee, the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Committee, was created by the railroads, the larger railroads that were seeing competition from the smaller railroads, and the ICC was created as a filter so as to wipe out the ability of the small guys.
Yeah.
That was the first regulatory organization. I saw that being in flight transportation and airport noise. It's one of the reasons I decided not to pursue that career path.
Well, as Thomas Jefferson said famously, and I think this line was inserted into the, I believe it was Jefferson, I know the line was inserted into the movie The Patriot. And why would I exchange one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away? I suppose that works very accurately in your case.
How do you mean?
That is, I mean, your effort is about, I think we all here would agree that we should return more power to our state and to our communities as opposed to Washington, D.C. Of course, it's people like us who have taken that position all along, right? And it was people like you guys who back in the 60s and 70s, with the best of intentions, shifted huge power. And I mean, I give you, as you know, that power shift to Washington, D.C., that many of the well-intentioned activists were simply useful idiots for corporations who would benefit from this. And it's certainly true that big businesses tend to benefit from expanded government power. But I don't know why anyone here would buy your argument that expanded government power in D.C., that you have had this awakening, which I'm very glad for, that expanded government power in D.C. is bad. Your argument then is, let's expand and create this corpus of arbitrary government power right here in Bellingham, so we can push people around at the local level. I don't know. I think that Todd's argument for a view that takes more of freedom into account is much stronger. In the farm stand case, it was actually the primary group of regulations were the Americans with Disabilities Act, pushed by peoples with great intentions, in violation of the basic principles of federalism and local control, that now, you're absolutely right, have placed a greater burden on small businesses and sole proprietors than on the big corporations. But those were not pushed by big corporations. Those were pushed by people in wheelchairs who had the best of intentions to make this country a better place. And they did it in a way that has been damaging to real people and shifted power from our communities to DC. So that's, and in the case of the horse camp, was 100% county level regulation.
Let me just say, I used to work at the Department of Natural Resources. So I've worked inside an agency and seen how regulations are made. And frankly, the answer to too much government is not more government. And what this does is simply add yet another layer of, and I think arbitrary is a good word, government. If you don't know, if your rights are at the whim of your neighbors or community, you fundamentally don't have any rights. And like I said, everywhere the system that they're advocating has been tried, it's been worse for individuals and for the environment.
A comment I have,
Okay.
being a builder, I agree with you that if you have more big government, the answer is not more government. But when you need to protect yourself from an environment going south, you need more regulations. And I'll give you a case in point. You guys probably don't know this, but our drinking water is threatened. It's been categorized by the EPA for decades now as a threatened body of water for our drinking water.
This is Lake Whatcom.
Yeah. So Lake Whatcom has stricter and stricter regulations that are, for me, I had to turn down a very large project last month because the regulations blocked the homeowners' ability to develop their land the way they needed to because it would further threaten drinking water. I'm a CEO, I own a corporation. When I put on my CEO hat, I'm not a happy camper, especially in this market when there's not a lot of building going on. As the environmentalist in me, I favor what happened to my company because it's protecting the water, and that's more important than my bottom line. So it's about protection. It's not about, to me, it's freedom is good, growth is good for a while, and then it's not.
Says who? Who decides that?
The society, the community has to do that. And I believe that it's the local community, it's the person breathing the air in this room that should have more to say about the air in this room than Nestle's corporation or Peabody Energy. If our air is threatened, I'm going to stand up for it. And that's what this Bill of Rights is about.
We'll go to questions. I got something
Yeah.
to say, but we'll go.
Okay. Katrina, did you want to start with?
Start with your question?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, 2 nights ago, the college Republicans in the Western...
Excuse me, could you speak up? I may be the only one here that isn't hearing you, but it would be helpful.
Okay, I will. 2 nights ago, the Western Libertarians and the college Republicans met up for a meeting, and we asked our members to write down some questions. And Tom and I are both going to ask 2 questions. One for the free market panel, and another for the coal-free Bellingham panel. And these questions don't necessarily represent our personal opinions. My first question is for the free market panel. If some politicians are for the coal terminal because of the opportunity for job creation and to provide millions in tax revenue, should they put in all of their effort to make it happen, even if the majority of the community is against it, and or if the coal terminal will violate current environmental laws?
I'll jump in on that and start with the second part of it first. No one who is elected to office, everyone who's elected to office takes a pledge to support and uphold the constitutions and the laws. No one who's elected to office should attempt to violate actual law. But the flip side, or the first question, is a classic question. Goes way back to, Edmund Burke, the famous British statesman, made the most famous speech on this idea, is someone elected, is their job to try to represent their constituency directly, that is to sort of act based on public opinion polls, or once they're elected, are they to use their judgment And Bert's answer and my answer, and I think the only actual sort of practical answer is that people are elected to use their judgment. And we have elections to elect people to use their judgment while in office. They have ethical duties to be honest about what they're going to do, but it's functionally impossible to for anybody who's elected to office to simply keep a finger in the wind. So that would be my answer to those two questions.
I would just add to that by saying that when you take a look at this, as an attorney, I believe in precision in language. And so I think what you need to do is stop and think for a minute. And we've allowed the conversation to get away from us by calling this a coal terminal. Well, that's only one part of this. What it really is supposed to be called is a bulk commodity terminal. And the reason is that the structure for it is to ship out numerous products to numerous destinations from one centralized location. So I think we do a big disservice by calling this the coal terminal. But, you know, and if you want to talk about grain producers and their hopes for this terminal, that's a conversation that should be held, I believe. But first of all, I think the politicians around here did a really big disservice to the community by jumping on and saying that you know, they wanted to oppose this immediately. I think it cost the former mayor of Bellingham his job. The current mayor did a very good job. She said, you know what I'm going to look at is, let's find out what the proposal actually is. Let's make sure the applicants are in a capacity to build that proposal. And then let's go through the process and see if the laws that we have in place are going to allow us to mitigate for potential harms. And if we can mitigate, then we mitigate. If we can't mitigate, then we need to find a different project. And that's a very reasonable approach, I think, to something that is a very, very big project.